In many respects, the Transport Design and Development Museum at Station Avenue, Kew, began when I was 4½, that is in 1948. I found a bassinet framework, this is the chassis of an early pram, in Station Avenue. I pushed it home, and instead of reprimanding me, my parents thought it was rather amusing that I'd brought this discarded object home, and they encouraged me with regard to my interest in transport. For the last 20 years I've been very interested in similarities, and I now, instead of looking at the differences of similar objects within a single category, I look at a broad spectrum of objects and identify significant similarities. So essentially I'm looking at the similarities of dissimilar objects, and wherever possible transcending the artificial boundary between the man-made and the natural world. It has involved me thinking day and night and concentrating very hard at the forefront of object interpretation. I don't know of any other museum that interprets objects in this way. I believe that similarities are far more significant than differences. This museum has a refreshment area at the very start, so that the visitor, who may have travelled some distance, is welcomed with a free drink, with a free snack, prior to embarking on their tour. In many respects, the museum has been a very, very difficult project. Not only the finding of the objects, the deciding what should be and should not be in the museum. The first task was to position ground level objects, these tend to be larger objects, on the floor of the museum in a route which is a useful evolutionary pathway to describe the points which I wanted to make. Then the task really began of finding upper level, low complexity objects, typically bicycles, tricycles, invalid carriages, in order to interpret the lower level objects on a similarity basis. The museum has been constructed twice. The first time it was a labour of love, it was how I wanted it to be. Then sadly, 7 years ago we suffered an arson attack, and it is very sad now that the museum is once again complete that is under a development threat, and it must now move. It will not be reconstructed for the third time. This is beyond my personal capability. The current problem facing Kew Transport Museum is that it is in the path of a redevelopment of Station Avenue. Although this area in Kew is rich in past history and has been the site of 100 years of significant development, much of it in the transport field, a developer wishes to transform this area into a housing estate. It is fair to say that the developer has offered alternative premises for the museum, but this is actually an enhanced railway arch and not really suitable. Its placard board would be at right angles to the sight line of visitors, which would make access difficult. It is at the far end of the site, away from the main tourist access point, and because the railway arch has a vaulted ceiling, this precludes the two-tier arrangement of the display, which is so crucial to object interpretation. In short, the building is unsatisfactory. At the moment, the future of the museum is in doubt. I wish to continue with my work, but it's tragic that having developed a useful educational facility, that I am being swept aside by what is regarded as development. While I appreciate that housing is important, I also think that education is very important, and the teaching of engineering and connections between natural science, technology, history and art, the requirements of those teaching those subjects are well served by this establishment, and I believe that Richmond Council should have provided a planning brief to encourage development on this site around the museum. I've done my best. I'm rather saddened by the outcome, and I'd like to think that even at this 11th hour there could be some scope for rescue.